My name is Phil Perazio, and I'm a urologic oncologist, a surgeon. Like many of you, I absolutely love what I do, and I would not choose another profession. But I have struggled with professional identity, practice efficiency, and wellness over the years. Operate with Zen is a podcast designed to explore a mindful approach to surgery and to being a surgeon. By discussing these struggles and mindful solutions, I hope together we can create a community of strong and healthy surgeons. Enjoy. Welcome to this episode of Operate with Zen. Today I have the great pleasure of being joined by good friend Dharam Kaushik. Dharam, introduce yourself to the audience.
Hi, Phil. Thank you so much for having me on your podcast. Hi, guys. I'm Dharam Kaushik. I'm a urologic oncology faculty at San Antonio, University of Texas Health in San Antonio. And also, I'm a program director for the Society of Urologic Oncology Fellowship, and I'm also a certified yoga teacher.
Well, thank you. Thank you for being here. So you and I share a lot of things in common. We both do big urologic oncology cases, and we both do yoga. So what do you want to start with, Dharam? Which one do you want to talk about first?
It's up to you. Yes, I think with the wellness and well-being and burnout, I think we can start with yoga. We can start with well-being, and I can tell my story of how I got involved in yoga during pandemic.
That's awesome. Yeah, why don't you give us a little bit of the origin story? Tell us how this journey started for you, and I'll preempt it by saying, because you and I have talked many times, you are not always into yoga.
Correct. So that is right, Phil. Actually, I grew up in India, and as a kid, my parents wanted me to learn yoga and do yoga, but I ran away from yoga. I was not interested because I thought it was very strange and weird, and I didn't want to be a contortionist. It's ironic that I learned yoga in San Antonio. And the reason is, as you know, during COVID pandemic, more than 65% of physicians reported burnout. And doing these big cancer cases like Phil, you do, I was also, I also experienced burnout. But with yoga, with family support, I was able to get out of feeling burned out. Now, with this personal experience of burnout and of several different colleagues, I thought about developing some kind of framework to address at a tangible level within my sphere of influence. What can I do for my people, that is healthcare workers within my community? And I reflected on it for a long time, and an opportunity just came up. The yoga studio where I took yoga classes was offering a 10-month yoga teacher training, and they tailored it for professionals. So the training was only on weekends. And I decided, you know what, yoga has benefited me so much. I should go and learn yoga and teach my people. So that's when I started, learning yoga. And now for almost a year, I've been teaching yoga specifically to healthcare workers. I do it for free. I do it on weekend. We have trained more than 400 doctors, nurses, mid-levels, physician assistants, medical students, residents, fellows.
That's amazing. I love that story. And I just want to draw some parallels too. It's really interesting. One of the other guests this season is someone named Michelle Kirk, who's she's a pediatrician. And her story started, she was never a runner. And then she picked up running as a way to be healthy and as a stress outlet and a way to help with this. And now is a run coach and helps healthcare workers all over kind of her sphere to help do that. And I think community is a huge part of this healing process. And I want to congratulate you for that.
Yeah, no, thank you, Phil. And same for you. I mean, you're doing this podcast. That's something very tangible. Yes, we can go to meetings and we can discuss papers and we can present data on burnout and stuff. But the bottom line is, it is, it has to be one of us who has to step in and say, you know what, I want to do something for my community. Like you are doing this amazing podcast for surgeons.
Well, thank you, Dharam. So let's go back to burnout. How did burnout manifest itself in you? What did you feel? What did you experience? When did you know you were in an episode of burnout?
So I think it's always like it's an insidious process. I think it takes time. You're tired, you're fatigued, you're kind of like uh, checked out at more so at a personal level. You are not. For me, it was like I was not working out as much. I was sleep deprived, and my body was hurting. And I realized I was not taking care of myself. And then, of course, listening to family is important. Um, my wife would tell me, you look tired, you are exhausted, you need to kind of take a vacation or do something for yourself.
Yeah, I think it's hard as a surgeon, right? We are perpetually tired. We are perpetually fatigued, and challenged. But burnout is a different feeling. It takes that to the next level where it is really kind of a exhaustion of the soul, where it's not just being physically tired, but you look forward to the next step of your day. You don't feel like looking forward to any part of your day. And it really is a tremendous drag on you and the people around you. I don't know if you shared kind of similar experiences.
Yeah, so I agree, Phil. So it's um, it's what they call emotional exhaustion. You just are drained. You don't have anything to give, and you struggle for compassion. And the bottom line is, if your tank of compassion is not full, you cannot give compassion to someone else. So I think it's important for us as surgeons, because we are not only mentally exhausted, we are physically exhausted. You're talking about big cases, you're standing there in the operating room, Phil, for 10, 12, sometimes 14 hours, doing some massive cases. That is a physical labor on your body, on your neck, on your back, on your shoulders. And I think when you combine that with the mental aspect, mentally fatigued, physically fatigued, it's a compounded impact on your overall well-being.
Yeah, absolutely. And big cases are exhausting, and honestly, a busy day of little cases can be exhausting too. Running back and forth, it's a different kind of exhaustion. But our days can be challenging, but they also can be incredibly fun when we get things aligned, right?
Yes,
And
yes.
and when we are aligned. And kudos to your wife, and my wife's done the same thing for me. I think stakeholders are incredibly important in helping us recognize when we're burnt out, when we're struggling. And it could be a significant other, it could be a spouse, it could be a friend, it could be a colleague or co-resident. But I think it's important to ask people, or make it formal and say, hey, listen, if I'm not behaving right, if you're worried about me, please say something. And I think stakeholders in our lives are a huge part in combating this burnout, because when you're alone and when you really feel like you're alone, it makes it that much harder to kind of climb out of that hole.
Yeah, I agree. And maintaining a false sense of balance in today's world, when it's a struggle, and trying to kind of appear outwardly calm and motivated when inside you are completely drained, you are worn out, you have nothing to give. I think that's very critical for us to listen to our loved one, people around us, and if they're trying to tell us something, listening. and acknowledging, and then changing our behavior, reflecting on what people are telling us. And sometimes we just have to reflect on our own self, introspection, and say, you know what, I need to cut back a little bit.
Yeah, and I think this is going to be a beautiful segue into talking about yoga. It's one of the things that yoga taught me. We're all really good at looking at other people, and I don't want to say passing judgment. That's not necessarily what I mean, but saying, hey, Dharam looks burnt out, or Dharam looks like he's struggling. It's really hard to do that internally with yourself and to be honest with yourself. And one of the things yoga taught me, first through physical sensation and then beyond, is how to understand what's going on inside my body and what I'm feeling and experiencing. So maybe tell us a little bit about your yoga experience and how it may tie in.
Yeah, so Phil, I think you and I were both on the same page. So yoga, the whole purpose of yoga is to find silence, is to calm our mind. The physical postures are there, but that's not the main objective of yoga. It's to create a sense of calmness, silence, so that we can think, we can reflect, finding that space within our mind to connect with ourself and relax. Now, how does it help? So burnout, let's just divide framework of burnout the way I think it is. It's a body and mind. So you're physically burned out. So yoga helps by, all these postures we do. It targets the big muscle groups and the smaller muscle groups. It improves the proprioception. When you are doing balancing pose, it's improving your proprioception. When you're doing breath work, you're developing interoceptions. The interoceptions, that is the awareness, your brain's awareness of what's going on inside your body. And the example is, you had a long day, your neck is hurting, back is hurting, and you are acknowledging that. You are being very aware of what's happening to your body. That comes with yoga. For me, it comes with yoga because it creates a sense of awareness of my own body, not just the physical, but the internal sensations. So I see yoga as helping the mind-body connection in this way.
Yeah, I agree with you completely. I just linking yoga directly to the operating room. I can think of a few aha moments in my life after I started doing yoga. And one of them was, just sitting in the operating room and doing an open operation, and recognizing that I was putting everything in my back body. And in yoga terms, that's all of a kind of our posterior chain, neck, back muscles, glutes and hamstrings, kind of holding all of the stress and holding my entire body weight up with just my back body, realizing that I had a whole front body that wasn't being used and could distribute some of that tension and some of that. And by front body, core, chest, anterior neck. And so I try and teach our residents that now, is say, hey, listen, do you feel what's going on in your body right now? Do you feel what's going on in your back and your neck? That's your back body. You can also pick yourself up using your front body and recognize that subtle difference. And that was a huge aha moment for me that yoga taught me in the operating room, and changed the way my neck and back feel almost on a regular basis.
Yeah, so that's great. And I think part of it is just the ergonomics. You learn to be efficient with the ergonomics of your body. So when I trained for this yoga teacher training in the class, I would look at each posture as how would it help a surgeon. When I'm doing a thrombectomy, how can a chair pose in yoga or warrior one in yoga can help me? So my whole premise was, how can I improve the ergonomics using whatever 200, 300 poses I learned? And I have applied all that to the classes I give for healthcare workers. So ergonomics, body sensation, proprioception, interoceptions, those are very important sub-levels, subcategories to address burnout.
Yeah. And I know you're very thoughtful about this, Dharam. So tell us, I mean, for the surgeons, for the people in the operating room, what are some of the yoga poses and principles you work on with them?
Yeah, so great question. So I actually divide the class into, first is a relaxing, 5 minutes of relaxation. So you're kind of getting your sympathetic system down and activating your parasympathetic system, which is the system we need to conceptually think and relax. Then next 10-15 minutes I spend on core work. So core, not just the external obliques, but also the iliopsoas muscle, the back muscle, the glutes, the hamstrings. And then I spend 20 minutes or so on endurance. So I combine a flow, yoga flow. I use different poses such as sun salutation A, sun salutation B, warrior variations. After that, I address back muscles. So do 3 or 4 different poses for back muscles. And then I end up with some relaxation and breath work.
I can't, it really makes me want to go do a yoga class with you right now. It sounds incredible. And, whether you're really into yoga or not, and even if you don't want to try yoga, the principles Dharam just went over are so important for surgeons. First of all, mind control, relaxation, and being able to kind of turn on that mind space and not always being in the go, go, go. And it really is a lot about, it's not unplugging. It's actually engaging a different part of our system and a different part of our body so that we can be more introspective and thoughtful. And then the physical parts of it, core muscles, endurance, whether you want to do it in a yoga class or cardio, these are natural ways to actually practice what's going to happen in the operating room. Your heart rate's going to go up, your blood pressure is going to go up as you're operating on somebody. So by practicing those physical activities, it gets your body and mind attuned to that. It makes you a better surgeon. And then lastly, obviously focusing on back and the things, the things we need to do to be able to preserve our musculature and preserve our spinal kind of ergonomics are hugely important. So those core principles are so key for surgeons to hear, Dharam, I think.
Yeah, so I agree. So I teach heart yoga. So I actually rent a studio and I crank up the heat up to 101, 102, because there is data that there is more breaking of actin and myosin filament in our muscle when it's heated. So I teach heart heated yoga and I make them sweat profusely. They are sore for days. And again, the reason being, you will at some point during the operating room experience may have similar kind of physical sensations in your body. Your heart rate will go up, you will sweat profusely, you will be in a situation where you don't want to be in a situation. I don't play any music, I don't do any of the fancy stuff. I just make them almost suffer in doing yoga. And it's very surprising that they keep coming back to do more and do more and more.
No, but you're right. It's suffering in a very intentional way. I mean, and listen, all working out in some sense is suffering, but it's suffering in a very intentional way. And I remember a class I did in New Orleans. There's a great studio called Fireflow. So next time the AUA or one of our meetings is in New Orleans, you and I are going to go to Fireflow.
Okay.
And the instructor at this time, I've been there multiple times since, she said, we are going to do the same sequence 7 times in a row, in the dark, in the heat. Don't look at anybody else. Don't look at yourself. This is going to be mind-numbingly boring. That's the challenge. Get better every single time. And the 7th sequence is going to be better than your 6th sequence, better than the 5th, et cetera. And I'll tell you, that was a challenge, But you're right. When you were done, it taught you something about yourself. I can do these challenging things, whether they're physically and mentally challenging, and you become better on the flip side of it.
Yeah, it actually teaches the bigger picture, Phil, is it teaches you to look at life the way it is at that time without wearing any kind of colored glasses. What happens is we all wear some kind of colored glasses and we say, I'm wearing red, so I see everything red. I'm wearing yellow glasses, so I see everything as yellow. In reality, is it's not red or yellow. It is, we have to see life as it is presenting itself, how it's unfolding. um, Wanted things may not happen in life, and unwanted things will happen in life. That is just life. And I think um, we dwell too much on our past, or keep worrying too much about the future, and we miss out on that opportunity to be present right now and say, what can I do right now to be absolutely present? We miss out on that big time. And I think that's why yoga kind of teaches you in a different way of how to get to that point.
Yeah, I agree with you. It can be almost, I don't want to be too dramatic here, but it can be almost religious when you're really in the moment. And people experience when they're running. Also, they experience this hiking, mountain biking, skiing, whatever it may be. But you can get this in a regular basis in a yoga class where you are physically and mentally into the moment. What's going on in your body, what's going on in the room, everything, but only in the moment. And it's kind of this great, I love the dichotomies in yoga, and it's kind of the infiniteness of what's going on, but the finiteness of the moment. And it's a really cool thing to kind of think about and feel.
Yeah, it's that's when we're connecting with ourselves, and that may last for a second, less than a second, with practice, 5 second, 10 second. But it's like an awe. You when you watch a beautiful sunrise, or you're watching stars or galaxies through a telescope, and you are in awe. You're not thinking about anything else. You are just, it's so beautiful. I think so. Yoga, same thing happens. Uh,
Yeah, I want to share an experience with you. I literally had this morning. You were talking about kind of the rose-colored glasses and kind of the way we view things. I was doing my normal morning routine, and part of that was is meditation. And I was doing a guided meditation this morning using one of the apps. And the mantra this morning, it was a meditation focused on gratitude. And one of the kind of statements was, I am thankful for my health. And you and I have talked about this. The audience who's listening may not know, but I recently shredded my knee and ACL, and I'm in a brace, and I can't do yoga. I can't run. I'm basically doing upper body, workouts, and kind of limited. And as you know, kind of being physical is a big part of who I am. So it's been a real kind of challenge for me. But sitting there and thinking about it, your first response is, I am so thankful for my health. I'm literally feeling my knee throbbing at the moment while I'm doing the meditation and while I'm thinking there and saying, how can I be thankful for my health? But it allows you to put it in perspective. I'm
yeah.
here. I'm fine. My family's upstairs. I've got a wonderful job and people I get to care for, and I'm healthy enough to do that. Right. So it really does help you kind of being mindful, being in the moment, put things in perspective. We don't always get there how we think we should get there, but having that initial negative experience and then being able to move on and put it in perspective was powerful for me this morning. And I think, came right to light when you talked about kind of being in the moment and not having rose-colored glasses.
Yeah, that's so, Phil, I agree. I think we are programmed as humans, as surgeons, for negativity bias. We are biased toward thinking most things negatively. And I think practicing positive thinking, gratitude, being thankful, gives us that space. I was talking about the silence we need to create between our brain, the prefrontal cortex, which makes all the decisions and rational decisions, versus the midbrain, which is the emotional center. So creating that space between that by uh, positive thinking, gratitude helps develop that space.
Yeah, you bring up a great point. Negativity bias is one of our strongest evolutionary challenges, but it's also incredibly helpful as a surgeon, right? We remember the bad things that happen in the operating room that prevents us from hopefully doing those things again or ending up in the same, adverse circumstances. But positive thinking and positive speak is incredibly important. So how do you do that in your operating room? How do you model that for your residents and fellows? Kind of what's your style?
So yeah, that's a great question. I think having, like, preparing for a big case, first of all, like thinking about it, what can go wrong, what we can do to make it right. Uh, so the preparation for any case starts days before, sometime weeks before, when we are going to operate. The second thing is, uh, whatever happens during that time, let's say we are doing a very difficult case, I think whatever happens, bad thing happen during a case, we get into some major bleeding or some organ injury. I think refraining from an emotional outburst, emotional reaction to that event is critical, because as soon as we entangle with our emotions, we are losing edge of our prefrontal cortex. We have given amygdala full control, and sooner or later it will hijack us. So understanding that, yes, bad thing will happen eventually. You do enough surgeries, something's gonna go wrong. I think one is a human error. Our goal should be to prevent that human error. But if it's something you cannot avoid and it's going to happen, I think not emotionally getting entangled to that event and saying, yeah, this happened, let's just figure out how to get out of this situation.
Yeah, I think that's great. There's 2 points there I want to get into a little bit more, and I agree with you completely. I love how you put it. We take away from our prefrontal cortex by giving to the amygdala, and that's the neuroscience behind this. And I always like to remind everybody that the physiology of emotions are 90 seconds long. Catecholamines, cortisol, adrenaline, it washes out of your bloodstream within 90 seconds. And whoever invented it, we've got the greatest thing to help our emotions wash over in the operating room. It's called a lap pad. You feel that emotion come on, lap pad. Put it right there on the field and just hold things and breathe for 90 seconds. And guess what? You can move on, and you can let all of those catecholamines wash out of your body. And that's the way kind of I do it. But yeah, I mean, we all have our ability to kind of do this, but I agree with you. When people get into troubles, when they accelerate, and they accelerate because they kind of give into that emotion and those hormones and adrenaline. Slow things down, do your breathing, and I think that's a huge lesson that you're giving our audience.
Yeah. So Phil, so what happens is, and I've I have observed myself, unfortunately, doing all these things also during surgery, and now I can observe what my body is kind of reacting. And I think most of the time the situation may not be that bad, but our body's reaction, our heart rate going up and our breath going faster, and we slowly we start sinking into a trap where we cannot think clearly, and then we don't like that situation, so it just a vicious cycle of downward spiral. So I think pausing, as you said, put a lap pad there and give 90 seconds to kind of let all the catecholamines wash out. It's a great advice.
And this is a great metaphor that we learn in yoga as well. Every yoga pose, even when you're doing your flows and really kind of moving, you're linking breath and flow, breath and pose, right? And so
Yeah.
when your heart rate's up, when your blood pressure's up, when you're moving, you are still controlling your breath. And that teaches us in the operating room, and it's taught me how to help kind of control in those stressful situations.
Yeah, so that's the essence of yoga is your breath. And I when I teach class, I always put emphasis on this. The primary objective is breath work. Everything else follows secondary. First is breath. Second, if you can, observe your sensation or your mind. And third is the posture. I tell them, if you cannot do posture, don't worry about it. Don't look at anyone. It's your journey. Just stay connected to the breath. Because if you look at the yoga literature written 2000 years ago, it's it's about one of the main framework is breath work. If you are practicing breath work, you are practicing yoga.
Yeah, and I love how you said that. Do the breath work, and it's your journey. I think those are great messages for people to hear, and I think it's also a good way to say, even yoga doesn't have to be the basis or the foundation of your physical workout. It is for you and I, but it doesn't have to be. But it gives you so many benefits in other things. You can learn how to breathe better in your running by doing breath work and yoga. You can improve your flexibility by doing yoga. You can improve your core strength by doing yoga. You can improve your body awareness by doing yoga. These are things that can be used in so many other physical and mental capacities that it's just a great way to train your body, train your mind, and practice these things.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a supplementary exercise for any kind of workout. I have, weightlifters who come in. I have martial art experts who come in and take classes. It's runners, ultra runners. It supplements anything you do.
Yeah, and I've learned now that, as I mentioned, my knee has been injured, so I have not been doing yoga on a daily basis. I actually haven't done it in about 6 weeks, which has really been a challenge for me because I love my yoga. But it's also made me realize how much I actually loved strength training and doing some other things that I can do now. It's the only thing I can do now. So it's made me kind of reflect and recognize when I go back to my yoga practice, I'm going to incorporate some other things in it. And while yoga still may be my foundation, I'm going to be a little more, I'll bring a little more variety into my physical workouts because of it.
Yeah, absolutely. So yoga is not the only workout I do. I run, I do elliptical, I do sometimes other classes within the gym. So I try to kind of do everything. But again, the core workout still is yoga.
So, Dharma, I want to ask you about your personal practice now, kind of on a weekly basis, your yoga and physical practice. And then I want to ask you about operating room kind of yoga and operating, practice as two kind of different questions. So, if you don't mind, just kind of what's your daily, weekly routine? How do you fit yoga and mindfulness into your life as a surgeon?
Yeah, so I just fit yoga and mindfulness in my life uh, and let it flow like for every aspect of my life, including surgery, uh, personal life, professional life. I try to take 3 classes in a week at a local studio. I teach one, sometimes 2 classes in a month on a weekend. And I have to do some prep work. I'd like to do some prep work for those classes so that I can tailor postures for healthcare professionals. And I try to do some kind of cardio workout, either running or elliptical, at least twice in a week. So these are the main things I do. I also, if I'm in operating room, let's say late, Between cases, I will knock out few postures here and there while the case is being turned over. Or if I'm in clinic and waiting for my patients to be roomed, I do some chair pose or something, because I think it just keeps the flow going. And then no matter what day it is, I find 5 minutes and I do some kind of balancing pose. If I come home late, I'll just, before I get into shower or something, I'll do a balancing, quick flow balance, from warrior 3 to warrior 2 to, you know, dancer pose to this and that, kind of make up my own flow now. And I do it as just kind of like, fun for me.
That's great. And I think really important message. Yes, you do yoga, try to do 2 to 3 classes a week, but you don't have to do an hour-long class to get the experience and the benefits. It can be 5 minutes between cases. It can be 5 minutes of balance. It can be short kind of breath and posture work. There are lots of mini ways to kind of get this in.
Yes, absolutely. We can find so much time in our life. It doesn't have to be a dedicated, I have to go and do yoga 1 hour in a gym, how I'm going to find time. No, sometimes you don't have that time. You don't have that luxury. We don't have it as surgeons. So we need to gain time by doing these kind of smaller workout in between our day-to-day life.
And now let's say you've got a, big operative day, how do you fit kind of yoga into that day, or do you fit it into that day? Is it part of your, before case, after case, between case? What do you do there?
Yeah, so if I have a long day ahead of me, I try to get something like a workout, get up early, do a small 30-minute workout, 20-minute workout, try to get some poses, or do elliptical. And then when I'm operating, I am very aware. If it's a long case, I'm very aware of what I'm doing wrong with my body, and I try to correct it during that case. So if it's an 8-hour case, 9-hour case, I will, on multiple occasions, I will correct myself. And if I can do a small here and there, stretch, I will do that during surgery.
What do the trainees and the nurses think? How do you tell them? Do you get them involved? How's that work?
Yeah, it's fun actually. I scrub in, I know it's gonna be a long case. I do a few little poses there, and they're like, "Oh, look, Kaushik is doing his yoga thingy. Let me try this." And then they try, and then they laugh. It's kind of fun because it's something like they look forward to. Like, "Oh, you're not doing your stretch today. You're not doing this Shiva squat today, or this and leg raise. What's going on with you?"
Yeah, it's a ton of fun. You've got to put you put your ego to the side, and it's a ton of fun to do these things. And when you're very comfortable doing it, who cares what other people say? And they'll make fun of you at first, and they'll laugh, and then the next thing you know, they're doing it too, and they're having fun with it, and it can change kind of the atmosphere of an operating room. So kudos to you for doing that.
Oh yeah, no, it's a lot of fun. I enjoy it, and now actually most of my staff, they kind of do something. Some of them take classes during this my classes, so it's kind of fun.
Well, what else, tell me what else you want to talk about. What are we missing here? What should the audience really know about you, about this practice?
I think the bigger picture, Phil, is any practice, and it doesn't have to be yoga. Any practice where you are connecting with your body and mind, and giving yourself a space, some silence. It can be Tai Chi, it can be running, it can be stretching, it can be walk, it can be anything, fishing. You're connecting with your body, you're aware of your body, and gradually you are aware of your mind. Is very important for us, for surgeons. It's important for everyone, but it's very, very important for us because we are we are in a profession where we have a very high rate of burnout, physical and mental exhaustion. So we really have to take care of ourselves so that we can take care of other people.
I think that's beautiful. I think that's one of our enduring messages on this podcast is, you can't care for others if you don't care for yourself. And the message today is really strong. I've been asking people, during this season, a little bit about vulnerability, which is a little bit off topic for us. But, vulnerability is a huge part of being a leader and being part of a team and expressing that. And I just wonder if you wouldn't, maybe share some of your experience with vulnerability and how you kind of think about it and interact with your team.
Yeah, so I think sign of a true leader, is being vulnerable. I think the false idea, the false sense of like, oh, I'm not vulnerable, nothing will happen to me. That's just denial. Again, as I said at the beginning, trying to be outwardly calm and motivated, whereas inside you're just not doing well is not a good idea. I think talking about it, about our failures, and accepting that we have fears of certain things, it's extremely important, because otherwise we will be completely drained. It will wear us out. So I think it's very important for leaders, people who are in really leadership position, to address and say, you know what, I'm afraid of this. What do you think?
Yeah, I think that's a great point and very well said. We're all leaders in our operating room. And when we are not expressing vulnerability, we're wasting valuable energy, right? It takes so much energy to hold that vulnerability in and put on that stoic, tough face. And then the flip side, it's much easier for people to follow someone they connect with and someone they feel connected with through emotion, and through shared struggles. And if you're not willing to share your struggles with the people around you, you're basically on an island.
Yeah, I mean, I think failure teaches us to be humble, to be open, and accepting our failures, accepting our mistakes, being vulnerable, especially in the operating room where you have amazing talent. You're surrounded by amazing residents, fellows, faculty members, medical students. I, I mean, for me personally, I listen to every single person who is in the operating room. If someone says, hey, I think this is not how this should be, I respect them, because it takes courage for someone to speak something, to tell a leader in the operating room something. So I respect that. I see that as a sign of courage, that a medical student or a resident or a fellow spoke something to me. One, he or she is very comfortable with our relationship we have, which is what you want. Ultimately, it's the teamwork. It's not one person's job, it's a team. And I think for having a good team, it means good communication, means cutting out all these boundaries about, oh, I'm stoic, I don't listen to this. No.
Yeah, I think that's a great message for people to hear. And there's literature supporting this now. I mean, just the last couple of weeks, paper in JAMA, I don't know if you saw this one, where dyads of surgeons and anesthesiologists, the more they work together, the lower the complication rate. In several thousand hepatobiliary surgeries, I think it was, or GI surgeries, I can't remember. It's not really that important. And it's not, listen, they weren't doing yoga together. They weren't being mindful together, but it just shows you the importance of teamwork and how we can create those safe, mindful, team-oriented spaces.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, there's a lot of data which we all practice from the airline industry, how they talk, how they communicate. There is no chain of command thing. Everyone, if there is a red flag, they talk, they speak. Yeah.
Yeah. And I always, try and bring in the mindfulness pearls when we can, but the three jewels of Buddhism are, the first is kind of Buddha, or the working on your internal kind of, you could call it meditative practices, your dharma or your duty-based practices. And then the third is community, and working together in a community is a huge part of who we are as surgeons. We're not, it's not the Halstedian surgeon on an island anymore. This is a team sport. This is a team game, and engaging the community and embracing the people around you is such a huge part of it.
Yeah, I mean, that's beautifully said, Phil. I completely agree. I think it's a teamwork, it's a community event, because going back to the philosophy, nothing will be permanent. There is impermanence to everything. So there's only so much we can continue to, for Stoic leader, they can pretend only so much. It's not going to be permanent. So I think it's a constant evolution of ideas and thoughts and processes. We have to be just aware of when do we fit in the right thought with the right process.
I love it. So before I summarize, I just want to tell the audience, we're going to give a little bonus content with this podcast. Dharam's going to take us through a little bit of breath work after we finished here, and that'll be on the podcast as a bonus few minutes that you can play independently anytime you want to work or practice your own breath work, either before, after, during surgery if you need it. But before we get to that, I just want to kind of summarize and thank you, Dharam. I think this was a wonderful past hour chatting with you and spending more time with you. I love where our story started. You were not a yoga person. You were not into yoga growing up in India, where yoga is very prevalent, but this has become a part of who you are. And it grew out of a desire to combat burnout. And you did so with yoga and with support of the people around you, including family. We talked about how, burnout can be insidious and you can feel tired and fatigued and checked out. But as surgeons, the physical component of what we do really compounds the emotional parts of it. And how yoga really helped you and helps others combat it, because in essence, what you're trying to do, as you said, was find a source of calmness, of silence, of time and space to reflect. And by bringing your body and mind together, that you could really kind of move forward and get through this suffering in an intentional way, which is, kind of bringing back that metaphor of putting people in a hot room and making them do poses. But the intentional suffering to be better, to get through the bad and really work towards the amazing is what I take home. And I think, we'll probably end up calling this podcast The Connection Between Body and Mind, because I think that's where we kept going throughout this. So I want to thank you very much for spending time with me and for sharing your story and your influences and thoughts with the audience.
Thank you so much, Phil. This was great conversation. Thank you for having me on your show.
Yeah. And before we do the breath work, I'll also say at any urologic meeting, if anybody who listens to this wants to do yoga, find Dharam and I. We'll probably be doing it together at least once, if not multiple times at the meetings now. And we'd love to have you come along and be a beginner or an experienced yogi with us. We'd love to have you along.
For sure. For sure. You don't need any prior experience to do yoga. We can modify any posture for any beginner. So that's not a problem.
Good. Well, thank you once again, and I look forward to seeing you in person sometime soon.
Thank you so much, Phil.